Thank you all so much for coming out today for our event. Thanks for being here. My name is Glenda. I'm the owner of the Doylestown Bookshop. This is our 6th year of partnering with the Doylestown Historical Society in March, where we celebrate local history every Saturday. To get our program started today, I'm going to introduce you to Donna Rhodes. She is working with the Doylestown Historical Society. She'll get us started with introductions.
Thank you all so much for being here today and sharing this very special day with all of us. And I'm now going to let Karen take over. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Donna. I also want to shout out to Donna and Fletcher Walls, who are the administrators of the Historical Society, who do so much behind the scenes, all the little things to really help all the exhibits look good and be interesting. So thank you so much for your support as well. And I want to echo my thanks especially to Sherry, really the co-designer of this exhibit. Thank you so much. But ultimately to my new acquaintances and hopefully friends, the Stratton and Nelson families. I feel like I've kind of become immersed in your family so that my family actually knows a lot about your family, maybe in some ways more than their own. So this exhibit and this presentation today actually has its roots in 2013's proclamation as February as Black History Month in Doylestown Borough. And at that time, the Historical Society was involved in doing research for that proclamation. And so when we were deciding how we were going to celebrate Black History Month and Women's History Month, I came across all of the research that had been done before and just was struck by how fascinating the stories of the families were. And most of our panelists here, Judith Stratton and Linda, I think Linda might have participated in that, Linda Nelson, Moran, Doreen Stratton, and Nancy Nelson, gave oral history to the researchers back in 2013. And after I read through that, I thought, what better way to exemplify the mission of the Doylestown Historical Society, which is to preserve and celebrate the creative and historical significance of Doylestown and the surrounding communities. They embody the history and also the zeal to preserve their own history. You'll see behind you some wonderful memorabilia, and then I hope you'll come to the exhibit to see even more. They've done a wonderful job of preserving their family history. But today we're even more excited to hear the stories of their ancestors that they've preserved and handed down, of what it's like to have lived in Doylestown from the 19th century to the present time, and especially as African American women, to have their stories heard when they're not often heard. So the format for today's discussion will be kind of a facilitated discussion where I'm going to ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves, and then we'll certainly leave time for your questions and maybe comments throughout. I think most of you have some kind of connection to the family, so we welcome questions during that time as well. But we all agree, since the family goes back so long to the 1880s, maybe I'll give you a little bit of context of their ancestors. And so, so here we have Joseph B., or J.B. Stratton, who was born in 1832, and he was a Civil War veteran. He was in the Navy in the Civil War, and the Navy was one of the few branches of the military that never discriminated against African Americans. So he was in the Civil War, was fortunate enough to survive, and then moved to Reading, where he was a barber. And then in the 1880s, his family, well, he had 3 wives. He was widowed twice, and his first wife was Adelaide or Adeline, in the sense that she comes up as both. He had 3 children with her. Unfortunately, she died, and then he married her sister, Emily, but she also died, and they did not have children together. And then with his third wife, Lily Ann, who was a school teacher. That's the next picture, yeah. Lily Ann Counselor. They had 8 children. And in the 1880s, they moved from Reading. And what the family has shared with me is that they really had to flee due to racial discrimination and intimidation at that time. Maybe they'll talk a little bit more about that. So they came to Doylestown, where Joseph was a barber. They lived in the house, many of you know, on East Ashland Street. And they rented that house. And unfortunately, Joseph Stratton died in 1900, just 3 months after his last child was born. and that last child was Grayson Savoy Stratton, who is the father of Doreen and Judith and Chris, who is somewhere. There he is, right behind me, right behind me. Right. As well as John and who am I forgetting? Barbara, right, who lives in Maryland. She went on to, a lot of times we know about the men through their professions, and the women on the census are often listed as housewife. This woman raised those children after her husband died, and then went on to be able to purchase that house that they rented for so many years. So that's one side of the family. So Joseph is the grandfather of Doreen and Judith. Okay, there's going to be a quiz afterwards. But he's actually the great-great-grandfather of Linda and Nancy. Okay, right. So this is Levi Garland Nelson. Okay, right. Stay tuned. So Levi Garland Nelson was the son of Levi and Grayson. Now remember Grayson, that name? They were both enslaved black men in Virginia who were able to purchase their freedom. They were both barbers, and they also moved to Reading. So Levi Garland Nelson actually married, wait for it, Joseph Stratton's daughter. But his uncle, Grayson, married Joseph Stratton's sister. So this family is connected on multiple generations. And any of you who've done Ancestry.com or Family Search, it just kind of blows its mind, all these connections. But this is part of why we did the Nelson and Strattons, because they've been connected for many generations. So Levi and his wife, Amelia, moved to Doylestown in about 1881, where he was a barber. He worked for someone else for a while, then had his own shop around the old courthouse. And then by 1897, he became the first African-American person to be elected to Borough Council. And he was there when the council approved the Willow Grove trolley from Willow Grove to Doylestown. That's a shout out to another exhibit at DHS, the trolley, so one of my personal favorites. So it was their grandsons, who are the parents of Nancy and Linda. And so with that, we're going to switch more to the present day and hear the stories, some of which they have about their uncles and aunts and grandparents, but to hear from our distinguished panelists about their life in Doylestown. And I'm going to start right here to my left with Judith Stratton. So I'm going to ask each of them just to tell you a little bit about themselves, do their own introduction about their lives, what they'd like you to know before we get started.
Good afternoon, and thank you for coming. I'm Judith, and I was born in 1943 here in Doylestown, lived all my life here, except for 10 years when I lived in New York. I came back in 1974. I longed for the green grass and the trees of Doylestown, so I came home, lived with my parents, and sort of helped them in their later years to support them, both financially and, well, all kinds of ways. I have been fairly active in various organizations over the years and did some things that are a little unusual. I've been a belly dancer and everything else that you can possibly imagine. I tried to do some artwork along the, well, close to what my mother might have done, but I didn't quite make it, so I moved on to other things. I've been involved in various organizations. I was a horse person. I owned a horse for a while, and then I became too broke, and I decided it was time to not have a horse any longer. But now I organize dressage horse shows over in New Jersey. I am active in Doylestown Borough. I am on the Shade Tree Commission, and I'm the coordinator for the Doylestown Borough Church Street Community Garden. And I have been active. I'm in the VIA. I'm on the landscape committee for the designer house. I helped with the labyrinth, and I have also done some other things. I used to, count on my fingers how many it was, and there were 6 of them. And I'd get to number 5, and I couldn't remember what the 6th one was. So I stopped using the fingers anymore. It doesn't work. But I love Doylestown. I enjoy being here. I love our house. It's old and cold and all kinds of things, but you know how old houses are, but you sort of have an affinity for something. I am very active in gardening. That's what the sixth one is. I'm a master gardener. Sooner or later, it all comes back to me. And I just enjoy being here, and being a part of this exhibit and going back through all the memories has been quite a challenge. And every day we come up with some new story that we should or shouldn't tell. And it has been a pleasure to be here today to talk about my parents and my grandparents. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Linda Nelson Moran, and we lived on East Oakland Avenue, 168, until a couple of years ago when we sold the house, and we now live in Chalfont. And I was born in Doylestown in 1941, and came back in 1974. I lived in Washington, D.C. with my family. I worked for the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development speechwriter. And we came back in 74 after my father passed and moved back into 168. And my kids continued the legacy of going to Central Bucks, and that's pretty much it that I can think of right this minute.
I'm Doreen, and like Judy, I left Doylestown the first time in 1965, and was in California with my first husband. I loved it out there, and came back for a short while he went to Guam, then went back to California, the same place, and I got to travel back and forth the country. I think it was 5 times. And everybody wants to get on a plane and go overseas or go somewhere. There ain't nothing like traveling across the United States of America. I returned here in 1975 solely believing that I'm going to go back to California. I loved it out there. Well, I'm still here. I got kind of involved in the community. I worked for a while. I shed my second husband and decided nobody wants to be married to me, and I don't want to be married to anybody either. So I have been single since, oh my gosh, I think 1985. Then I was working. I worked at the courthouse for 20 years, put in my 20 years and said, bye-bye, Felicia. And since then, being retired, I've been involved with an awful lot of things. One of the wonderful things that I did was I traveled to Africa 3 different times. I've been to Ghana and to Kenya 2 separate times, and I loved going back to the motherland. I want to go again, but I have to win the lottery first. I've been active in the community as well for some time. Some of you may have seen me screaming out there at the Memorial Day parade, getting all the walkers out in time. I'm taking a break. I think they need to get someone younger to do that because I'm getting too old to stand out there with these little children, and they're starting, oh no, no candy, no candy. I am on the Human Relations Commission for the borough, which is a fairly recent commission, and we are responsible for maintaining that our community of Doylestown is a friendly and open community for everyone. And we are involved with getting some really nice things getting ready to happen. I'm also a very frustrated writer. I started writing back in 1975, and I wrote a novel and put it away because I had enough rejection letters to paste a wall. put it away, and let it sit in a drawer for about 10 years. And then I got involved with working with doing research on, there were 8 military women who died in Vietnam during the war. And my hope was to try to do 8 separate mini stories about these women. They were just fantastic. I got into 3 were somewhat completed. I was midway into the 4th. The woman who, she was in the service the longest, and I had just got her into Korea, and everything just kind of died. I couldn't. All of my resources and interviews kind of dried up. One thing is, I never served in the military. I was so attached to the military. My first husband was in the Air Force, and my second husband was a Vietnam veteran. So I had that affinity to it, and I really, I would just love to see that book get out there, but I can't. So I put that away and decided to pull out that novel again, which I did. And oh my Lord, Lordy, Lordy. Now I know why it didn't sell. Ay, ay. So what I did is I reread it. I rewrote a lot of it. I said, my gosh, the characters were like this, and I blew them up, added 5 chapters, and now I'm out there searching again. But it's, as I also want to say, it's wonderful here. I don't want to take up too much time because there are lovely questions that are going to be asked to us. So I'm going to turn it to Nancy.
It's so great to see everybody, and a lot of my elementary school classmates and high school and neighbors and just friends. And I'm just so glad that I have that support and my fan club. So I'm Nancy Nelson. I'm the daughter of Randall Nelson, better known as Randy the barber. He was just a wonderful dad, a great community man, loved children, and I couldn't be any prouder. My mother is Gladys Nelson, and she was a school nurse. She started at Doylestown Borough when they had the high school. And then about a year after she worked there, they went into Central Bell School District, and she became the nurse for Doylestown Borough, Linden, Doyle, Arley Mount Carmel, Central Bucks West, Kutz, and just unbelievable. I have to say that both of my parents were community-minded. They belonged to a lot of organizations, and they loved the community. Like I said, especially the children. And the barbershop was someplace where you could take your baby for his or her first haircut. So that is a great memory. I have 2 sisters and a niece. My oldest sister is Jeannie. She lives in Virginia. My twin sister, Nanette, just passed away a few months ago. So I'm sort of like on my own, but that's okay because she was a true spirit and always loved to tell everybody that I was older than she was. And that was only 10 minutes. My niece is Nanette's daughter, Nancy Benson Nicole, and I couldn't be more proud of her. She graduated from Swarthmore College with honors, and then she went into the Divinity School at Harvard and got her master's at Harvard Divinity School. She was ordained here at Doylestown Presbyterian Church, and that just meant a lot to my family. I guess I'm pretty much the homebody of Doylestown because I only left Doylestown for about 9 months and went to hairdressing school, Wilford Academy, thinking that I would be a barber. Unfortunately, my dad passed away before I could get involved in the business. But I I changed my occupation to dental assistant here in Doylestown, and I worked for David Rockefeller for 21 years. My other job that I had when I was smaller was working for my Aunt Louise and Uncle Leon, peeling potatoes. They had a they had a catering business, and Linda, yeah, Linda's their daughter. The best part of that job was that we had quality control, so we were allowed to taste everything. And of course, it passed the test because they were absolutely fantastic chefs. I later on left the dental assistant practice and went to Doylestown Hospital, not as a nurse, but as a finance patient billing employee. That was a good time. I was there for 27 years and retired about 5 years ago. So I've been around in Doylestown, staying with local people, and it's just been an interesting ride. The town is fantastic. Of course, we have our changes, but that's how it is. So that's kind of my history, and thank you.
Naturally, they save the best for last. And I'm looking out in the audience, and I saw my old boss walk in from Sears. Hi, Joe. He'll tell you I was a pain in the hinder because I was in the JCs, and I was always making phone calls, and my other co-worker, too. Anyway, I was born 1948, December 8th. And Doylestown Hospital, I believe. And attended the Old Barrow School. How many went to the Old Barrow School in Doylestown? All right. I've always wanted to have some kind of candlelight visual because they keep on tearing down and building stuff. So if any of you have any influence, if you know the mayor real well, he's back there hiding. He told me not to mention him. Sorry. But and I remembered when they built Linden, we packed up all our books and we walked from the Old Barrow School to Linden. I see somebody back there shaking their head. I guess she made that walk too. That was the great class in 1968 at Central Bucks. So after high school, I tried to go to college, Del Val College. I remembered my counselor in high school saying, "Don't do anything in science because you're really bad." And I majored in horticulture, and one of the things we do is go out and catch butterflies. And I said, can you picture a black man running around with a net in Doylestown trying to catch some stupid butterfly? Come here. That didn't work out, so I went to Seminole Junior College down in Sanford, Florida. There was a bunch of us from up there. They didn't have any dorms, so we had to rent a room. And I remember walking up to this one house, and the lady looked at everybody else who was white, and then she looked at me and said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm a Florida redneck. You know, you guys can't say here." That was the nicest compliment I ever had in my whole life. Somebody smiled at me, you know, because I was an Afro-American. Other than that, that didn't work out. I went into the Marine Corps when I finally left home, and liked it. I spent 6 years, and then I re-enlisted for 2, stationed down here like a Willow Grove. I settled in Doylestown, and I participated in the JCs and the Big Brothers. I was working for Doylestown Concrete Products, Roland Geho and Don Arnold. They had it before that big fire, and they had it for a year or 2 after that. But anyway, there was a gentleman there who was a supervisor at the juvenile home. And we were talking. I said, "Look, does anybody come down there, you know, like to volunteer and talk?" No, okay, well, you know, I'd like to try. So I went, and, you know, like I liked it. And then when I got in the JCs, I discovered the Big Brothers, and that was a lot of fun. I remember one time, you want to hear something funny? I asked my little brother, "How would you like to go roller skating, you know, Jamison rink?" And he said, "Well, I don't know how to roller skate." "Well, you know, neither do I, so, you know, we can teach each other." Well, lo and behold, he had them skates on, he was gone. I was still lacing mine up and falling on my butt. And he said, Chris, you all right?" Yeah, you keep going, don't worry about me. But we had times like that, and then I had another big brother, a little brother after that. My time in the JCs was very interesting, because at that time, if you wanted to get into politics, they said, "You're like, that's where you should start." And but I never liked that. And I remember my last year when I was the president. This is when our neighbor, Mr. Happ, was running for borough council, and the Democratic Party called me up, and I was burned out from, you know. In fact, I would come home from work, and I'd take the phone off the hook, and my father would say, "What are you doing that for?" "I don't want any calls." You're like, "I want to eat dinner," you know. But I told him no. After that, as I was still in the JCs, there was this my first project. I had to dress up like a Santa. I had a cotton beard at Mercer Museum, and I really had a great time. So from then on, I've been doing it. The 2 years I didn't do it. A couple of years ago, it snowed. If you all remember that big storm, you know, they closed down everything. Even the mayor was hiding. I don't think he was mayor then. So you're lucky. No, he was, yeah. All right. Okay. He's got this big red face now. You know, I'm probably going to get killed. Another time when I was sick, but every year it's a pleasure. The kids are great. They don't pull my beard anymore. And so as of after that, after I left Sears, I drove a school bus for 17 years. I figured after being in the Navy and working at Sears, you know, I'll get a real job. You know, I can have fun and be off on the holidays. Yeah. And all the moms have the kids back. So that was fun too. The parents really did a great job. You know, there's a lot of trust that they give, you know, the bus drivers, and, you know, they trained us better than when I was in the Marine Corps. Of course, I didn't do it in the Marine Corps, but anyway, I just retired there this past June, and I like waking up in the morning, scratching my head. Let me see, what can I not do today? Okay, it's nice having a choice. But this is really nice, and if you want to hear some funny stories, you know, I have a couple. The only advice I can say, if you ever lend your wheelbarrow out to, one of your relatives, when you go get it, and if they offer you something to drink, decline it. And of course, I didn't listen, and I had one, and we had another, and we had another, and I said, I'm leaving, and they said, oh, we're going to give you a ride in your wheelbarrow from Oakland Avenue to Ashland Street. Now that sounds like really, really easy. I don't know how many times it fell over. I don't know, like if they were laughing. But I remember waking up the next day, I felt like, a football player who was just in a game. I had all these bruises but that's what it's like having the Nelsons and Strattons, like on, the same block. We kept together. We had some good picnics. And I remember reheating up some ribs that we had, at a picnic, and we went for a ride. Everybody hopped in cars, we went for a ride over to New Hope and rode the train, and then we came back, and then Linda's mom, I fired up the grill, and I'm heating up the ribs, and she hollers at the window, "Boy, don't you burn them ribs." "Yes, ma'am, they ready now, come on." But we had a great time, and so I guess I'm done speaking.
Well, that's kind of a nice segue into maybe asking you for some stories about the homes. For people who don't know, the three homes that, two of you still live in, are on Church Street at Ashland and Oakland, right near Burpee Park. So I thought maybe you could talk a little bit about what it's been like to grow up in these, still live in homes you grew up in, and a little bit about that neighborhood in the Burpee Park, Mount Carmel area.
Our summers were over at the playground, and back then in the old day, the playground was it was packed with children of all ages every day during the summer. They had the pavilion that is now locked. Back then it was open, and there were tables that had to be, by the way, the tables that had to be put away every night in a room. My father would put them away, and in the morning he would bring them out. There was checkers, there was ping pong, there was someone who acted as the recreation person, where we did projects. We did lanyards and bracelets and worked with shells. It was a great place to be, because back then we could not go to the swimming pool, because being the color that we were not allowed to go to the pool. But Nancy will probably tell, if it wasn't for her father, he lobbied, and we were eventually able to go to the swimming pool. I think I was getting ready to go into 11th grade the first time I put my feet in the water down there. I learned how to swim, which was a wonderful thing, because people our color, very few of them know how to swim. So in that regard, I wasn't ever good enough to be on the racing team, but I learned how to swim. And that was a great thing to be aware of. I'm going to pass it on, because I could go on forever, but I just wanted to throw that little thing in about the playground.
Did you want to go?
I was just going to say, talking about the swimming pool, I remember when we finally could go to the swimming pool, and my mother took me for lessons, and it was really great. And then when we moved back to Doylestown, I took my kids to the swimming pool, one of which is here today, Bonnie Moran Freeman, over there in the corner.
Come on out here.
Because when we lived in Washington, they belonged to a swim team, and they were competitive swimmers, and they were like 8 and 9 years old. And when we came back here and went to Fanny Chapman, they wanted them to get on the swimming team, and then they decided they didn't want to, so they went on to pursue other things as far as, their athletics were concerned. My son was... what year was that when you were allowed? Oh, I don't even...
It was 57, 58, because I graduated.
No, it was earlier
in
than...
60.
Yeah, it was earlier than that because I graduated in 59.
Well, I went,
It had to be mid-50s.
it was a mid-50s.
Yeah, mid-50s. Mid-50s, somewhere around in there. Yeah, so...
With the swimming pool situation, all of our friends would say, "Would you like to come swimming with us?" And we'd say, "I'm sorry, but we can't." And they said, "Oh, why not?" And we said, "Well, we just can't." And it wasn't that we couldn't go, it was that we shouldn't go. One day, my sister Nanette, she was our spokesperson. She asked my dad, how come we can't go to this pool with our friends? And he said, "Well, let me check into that." So it ended up that he talked to Borough Council, he talked to all the powers that be, and they said, "We don't see any reason why you can't go." So of course, my dad came home and said, "Girls, get your swimming suits," and we were on our way. We took swimming lessons. All of us took swimming lessons. We did the, of course, afternoon fun, and then back then, and I don't know if it's still this way, but if you had a parent with you, you could stay longer. So my mom would go down to the pool, and because she was with us, we could stay longer. Well, it got to the point where my friends were saying, "Hey, do you think your mom will let us stay with her?" So basically, that's the story of Fanny Chapman, and we all enjoyed it. Every African American child was invited to join. There were no incidents, so it was a pleasure and fun, and we just had a lot of fun with our friends.
Anybody else want to comment about the neighborhood or also your experience as one of the very few African American families in town?
We had a great neighborhood. I live on Church Street, and of course I was surrounded by relatives, Linda and Doreen and Judy and Chris, and we were a lot of support for each other. But our neighborhood was great. You could go to anybody's house and just kind of hang out if you wanted to. But we always had to we did. I always had to tell our parents where we were. There were a lot of interesting people in our neighborhood. There were artists, people in the theater, that type of thing. And of course, as time goes on, everybody goes their own way. But we do have fond memories of a lot of our neighbors. As a matter of fact, there's two neighbors here. Charlotte and Peggy G. Crathamel. They are our neighbors, and we played a lot.
Yeah, the thing about the Berkeley playground, I think I spent most of my time there because I love basketball, and my bedroom was right on the corner, top east corner of the house, and if I saw anybody over there, like I'd run out and play. And I remember even sometimes late at night, some people would get brave because they didn't have anything else to do. There wasn't any cell phones and Facebook and what else. And they'd pull their car on the grass, shine the lights on the court, and would be playing basketball. Also, our father, along with Stan McFarland, and I think Peter, Stan's son, they would cut grass at the playground. I also recall Stan McFarland. He was there a lot. He would lock up the place and open it up. Ed Miller, some of you may remember. He'd start around like 4 to 6, and I think Bob Finn was there at night too. Ed Miller and I would play shuffleboard, and he always had peanuts in his pocket. And he's always, Stratton, you want a peanut? No, that's all right.
One more thing I want to say about Doylestown way back then. The streets rolled up at 9 o'clock at night, and one particular evening, all of us went up to Main Street right out here. There were no cars. It was dead silent, and we literally laid down in the middle of the street because it was something to do.
Maybe I'll start with Judith here, maybe talking about some other ways you think Doylestown has changed over the many years that you've lived here.
It has changed dramatically. When we had our house as children, behind us was the quarry, and we would just hang out. If we weren't over at Burpee, we were down at the quarry digging up everybody else's trash just to find some treasures. That was the thrill of the day. Behind us, it was all woods where there's now houses along Golfview Road, and we had trails through the woods, and we'd pick berries on the way down, and we would build forts. We had a ton of fun. We did not do anything as far as, because we didn't have television until the 50s. So when we were 6, 7, 8 years old, there was nothing else to do in town except go trail hunting and build forts. And we would have what we called dinners. We'd get a big leaf, some mud, and a couple of sticks and some water. We would take, believe it or not, the creek behind us where the stormwater drains out. There's a couple of what water was always there, and we would take that water. We would actually drink that water, and we're healthy. And we'd make mud pies out of the soil, and we'd eat these mud pies with these sticks. And this was how we enjoyed our life in Doylestown.
Yes, the town has changed. Even our street has changed. There were houses on our street that were, a lot of people here probably, all the old heads here remember Luther Nash. He built some wonderful houses in this town, sturdy, sound houses. And there were 3 on our block. They gone. They are gone. There's one more left, and yours is on Church Street. There's one more left on Ashland Street, and I fear that they are going to scrape it. And I every time something like that happens, I get very, like, why are they doing that? But there's been changes in the town. I guess everything, it's a type of evolution. And I guess the one thing I would like to see is I would like to see people coming into Doylestown who actually are able to live here and not have to take the train or the bus back someplace else instead of here. That's the one thing I think is missing in the borough, homes that regular people can afford. We often get, people often come up to us and say, boy, your house is worth a lot of money. And I say, no, not the house, the land. Because if something ever happened to us that we could not stay there anymore, you know, they'll scrape it and put something else up. I think that's the other fear. I hate seeing some of these really old structures go. But, you know, I guess that's something with our American DNA that goes back to when we first set our feet on this shore. That's all I got to say there.
I just want to jump in. We got a surprise. The Recorder of Deeds actually brought over the deed to Judith and Doreen's house, and it's right here for you to look at. And certainly Chris grew up there as well. So there's a lot of history in that house, and it's a treasure. So please come and take a look. In the interest of time, I just want to give you an opportunity to talk about some of your brushes with greatness and some of the celebrity encounters you have with some of our local notables, as well as people beyond that. And there's some photos on the table here as well, but I know a number of you have stories. We haven't really talked about Sid Stratton's wonderful career in music. He was really very well known on the main line and the Jersey Shore in this area with his orchestra, and I hope you'll see some of the artifacts relating to his career. But I know we've talked a lot about his career and then Nancy's friendship with Pearl Buck. So I invite you all to maybe talk a little bit about those experiences growing up.
My sister Nanette and I were invited to Pearl Buck's farm, and it was the farm at that time. It was not a historical home. Pearl had adopted a little girl who was a German brown baby, and she wanted her child to play and grow up with children that look like her. So we were invited. My mother told us about it, and all we thought about was, oh, we're going to a farm. You know? Well, we would go just about every Saturday, and we'd spend the day. And we knew her as Mrs. Walsh, so that's who I will probably say, if you're wondering who Mrs. Walsh is, that is Pearl Buck. Mrs. Walsh sent her chauffeur to us to pick us up and take us to the farm. When the first time we drove up, it was unbelievable. It was a gorgeous, and it still is, a gorgeous, gorgeous farm. We had the lay of the land. We could do anything we wanted. We rode horses, we went ice skating, we swam. The children from Welcome House would come over. There was a multiple amount of different races. There was never any fighting, no name calling. We all just had a really good time. Now, Mrs. Walsh's cows were champion dairy cows. And this one day, and I have to say, she gave us her undivided attention no matter what she was doing. We had no idea. We knew she was an author, but we had no idea of her fame. Her fame. So anyway, like I said, she gave us undivided attention. She was a typical mother. And Nanette went into, I have so many stories to tell you about my sister. But she went into Mrs. Walsh's office. And Mrs. Walsh stopped what she was doing, and Nanette said to her, and she was so excited about it, Mrs. Walsh, you have cows, and you can get a glass of milk whenever you want to. And Mrs. Walsh's response was, yes, I am lucky. So we spent, like I said, we spent the day, we went swimming. Mrs. Walsh brushed our hair and got us together to go home because she didn't want us to look different than the way we came. She said, if you don't look nice, then your mother won't let you come back. So now we joined about 5 years ago. We joined the Philbuck Foundation Volunteers, and so I volunteer there. To us, we felt like we were coming home. It now is. I mean, it's just absolutely a gorgeous farm. If nobody's ever gone there or has been there, you need to do that because it's beautiful. It's historic. This time of year is a great time to go because everything's blooming. It's just wonderful. So I would suggest that you take a tour of that. But that was one of our biggest things in our life, to tell you the truth.
No, I just wanted to talk about my parents had a catering business in Doylestown, and they were, like, did a lot of famous people. But the one thing is, we used to get everybody to work, like Doreen and Judy, and I don't think you guys ever worked. You were too young. Yeah. But anyhow, I remember this one day. My father had recruited a couple of people from Jenkintown that he knew, and we were getting ready to go out and do this job, and this kid came in, and his name was Reggie Jackson. And my father was telling him, all kinds of things to do, and he said, you don't mind doing these, this, do you, Reggie? And Reggie said, I don't care, Mr. Nelson, I'll do anything. I just want to make some money.
My first husband was a Jackson, and his brother was Reggie. So for a short while, he was my brother-in-law. I guess he always will be. And my son, I don't know, is Mark and Teen here? No? Mark spends a great deal of time going out to the coast with his wife, Christine, to stay at Reggie's,
My claim to fame of meeting someone who was important, when I worked with Metro Media in New York, I was able to go down and watch the taping. David Susskind was interviewing Bobby Kennedy. And I thought it was David Susskind who wanted it, but years later I realized it was probably Bobby who wanted to have someone sitting there in front of him that he could look at. And we ran down there, and we sat in the front row, my friend and I, and he kept playing with a rubber band the whole time he was being interviewed. And when the interview was over, all of us were able to go up and shake his hand and say hello to him. And that was a thrill for me because I love Bobby Kennedy.
Nancy, do you want to talk a little bit about Duke Ellington while we're...
My dad was a member of Doylestown Kiwanis Club, and they were looking to do something for the community, and all the men decided they wanted to have Duke Ellington come to Doylestown. And everybody's like, oh, this isn't going to happen. He's too busy. Well, my dad decided he was going to take it upon himself to contact him. So through letters and talking on the telephone and actually talking to Mr. Ellington, he was able to get a date set for Doylestown's concert with Duke Ellington and his orchestra. We did meet him for a short time while he was here. My dad was with him like all day that day, and we went. The concert was at Central Bucks West now, and we got our seats. And my mother knew what was going to happen, but we had no idea, and we were kind of wiggly, at the time because we were like 7 or 8. And she said, "Now you have to be quiet." So as the concert proceeded, Mr. Ellington said, "I would like to dedicate the next song to Jean, Nancy, and Nanette, and the song is "Sophisticated Ladies." Well, we were like beyond ourselves. We were like, we thought, oh, you can't touch us, you know. It was just, that was a fantastic time too. We did get to meet a lot of important, famous people, only because too, the barbershop drew a lot of people. There were a lot of stars who, and actors and actresses who were at the Playhouse in New Hope, and they would come and they'd say, do you know where I can get a good haircut? And they'd say, Nelson's Barbershop. So that's our story about Duke Ellington. After that, we were sent, and they're on the table back here, we were sent Christmas cards from Duke Ellington. And up until the time that he died, which was 1974. So we were able to keep a few of them. So that's our my fame. So that's about it.
Well, let me assure you, these are just the tip of the iceberg of the wonderful stories I've been privileged to hear over the last few months. But I know we're kind of coming to the end of our official time today. So please stay after. Please come back to the Historical Society and visit more and hear more.